The storm had become an unrelenting beast. The howling winds outside battered the old facility, flinging debris into the air, as if the heavens themselves were in chaos. Inside, the tension was no different. It wasn't just the roar of the storm that shook them, it was the memory of the battle that had just transpired, still ringing in their ears. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken grief, anger, and confusion. Penn was still in shock. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her shotgun, the metal cold against her gloved fingers. She could still see Ash's body, lying where she had fallen, blood pooling around her helmet. Ash had pushed her down to save her life, sacrificing her own in a split-second decision, but the weight of that fact seemed almost unreal to Penn. It was as though her mind refused to accept it. Ash was gone. The blast that had taken Ash had been so sudden, so swift. One moment she was there, charging forward, her sharp voice cutting through the din of the battlefield, and the next, she was on the ground, her life stolen by the very thing they had been sent to fight. Penn could still hear the screech of the Sentinel's weapon as it fired at them, those heavy, hollow shots that seemed to tear through the air like something unnatural. She had seen war before, fought in her fair share of battles, but this was different. This wasn't just an enemy. This was a machine, cold, calculating, relentless, and it had taken Ash from them. Alvarez had been the first to react, barking orders as he took in the situation, his face etched with the weight of leadership. He wasn't just a captain, he was a soldier, a man who had been through countless battles, and yet even he seemed shaken by the loss. He had tried to save her. He had tried to keep them all alive. But there had been no saving Ash. Penn, his voice cut through her fog of disbelief, sharp and commanding. Focus. We're not done yet. Penn blinked, tearing her eyes away from Ash's still form. She saw Alvarez's face, hard and resolute. His jaw was clenched tight, eyes narrowed, scanning the area for danger. He was already in motion, giving orders, taking control of the situation. But Penn couldn't shake the image of Ash, her friend, her comrade, dead on the ground. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Alvarez was right, of course. There was no time for grief now. The Sentinels were still out there. They couldn't afford to let Ash's sacrifice be in vain. They had to keep moving. They had to survive. Penn wiped the sweat from her brow and took a deep breath. Her body was trembling, but she forced herself to her feet. The blood was still rushing in her ears, drowning out everything but the memory of Ash's fall. She didn't know if she was angry, scared, or just numb, but she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't stop. Not now. The group moved cautiously through the facility, their footsteps echoing in the abandoned halls. The flickering lights overhead cast eerie shadows on the walls, making every corner seem like a potential danger. The building had been abandoned for years, but now it seemed to be alive, creaking, groaning, as though it were trying to warn them of what was to come. Mac was already ahead of them, his heavy machine gun slung across his shoulder as he checked his gear. His face was a mask of determination, but Penn could see the tension in his shoulders. He was taking this hard too. Ash had been a part of their team for years. They had fought together, laughed together, trusted one another with their lives. And now she was gone. "Everyone stay sharp," Alvarez's voice crackled over the comms. "We don't know how many of those things are still out there." Penn nodded, her grip tightening on her shotgun. The familiar weight of the weapon was comforting, but it didn't ease the turmoil in her chest. It was strange how, in moments like these, she could be so aware of every detail around her, the cold air in her lungs, the clank of her boots against the metal floor, and yet her mind felt distant, removed from reality. Ash had been more than just a teammate. She had been Penn's friend. And now that she was gone, it felt like a part of Penn had gone with her. Lei, the tech specialist, was at the back, her eyes glued to her data pad. She was typing furiously, trying to access the facility's systems and get them some kind of advantage. Lei was always calm under pressure, a steady presence when everything seemed to be falling apart. But now, even she seemed shaken, her brow furrowed as she worked quickly, her fingers flying over the keys. "I've cracked part of the system," Lei muttered, her voice low and focused. "I can see the layout of the facility. There are more rooms up ahead, but they're heavily fortified. We're going to need to be careful." Alvarez glanced back at her, nodding. "Good. Keep it up. We need all the intel we can get." They pressed on, moving through the dark, twisted halls of the facility. The air was heavy with the smell of oil and rust. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the emptiness, a constant reminder that they were not alone. Somewhere out there, the Sentinels were watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Penn could feel the tension building, the fear gnawing at the edges of her mind. She had fought Sentinels before, but nothing like this. These machines were different. They were faster, more advanced. And they weren't just out for blood, they were out for destruction. The facility was massive, its labyrinthine structure stretching for what felt like miles. Every room they entered seemed to be just a shadow of what it had once been. Broken terminals, shattered windows, and rusting metal were all that remained. But beneath the decay, there was something more, a sense of dread, a feeling that something was watching them, waiting for them to slip up. As they moved deeper into the facility, they came across a hallway lined with containment units. These were the holding cells for the Sentinels. The machines that had once been locked away were now free, roaming the facility with one goal in mind: to kill. Alvarez stopped in front of one of the doors, his face grim. "There are 4 units here," he said quietly. "That means there could be as many as 3 more out there, waiting for us." Penn's stomach twisted. She had known the Sentinels were deadly, but hearing it like this made it all the more real. They weren't just fighting a machine, they were fighting something that could think, that could strategize. And they were running out of time. Mac cursed under his breath as he checked his ammo. "We've killed the power, but that won't stop them. They're running off independent power cells. The stations are just for recharging. Leigh glanced up from her datapad, her face pale. If they're already partially charged, they could be active at any moment. Exactly, Alvarez said, his voice hard. We need to move quickly. We've got to warn the others. They hurried through the hallways, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Penn's mind raced as she thought about what lay ahead. They needed to find the command center. They needed to warn the rest of their team. But above all, they needed to survive. As they approached the next room, Penn's heart raced. She could hear the faint hum of machinery ahead. Something was coming. A low, mechanical whine filled the air, growing louder with every second. Without warning, a massive shadow loomed ahead, a hulking metal figure emerging from the darkness. It was another sentinel, larger, sleeker, more advanced. Its glowing red eyes fixed on them, scanning for targets. "Get down!" Alvarez shouted, diving behind cover. The sentinel raised its arm, the cannon mounted on its shoulder charging up. Penn barely had time to react before it unleashed a barrage of bullets, the rounds tearing through the air with deadly precision. The group scrambled to find cover, their hearts pounding as the machine advanced. Penn could feel the heat from the blast as she ducked behind a pillar, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was out of time. The sentinel was closing in. She grabbed her shotgun and took a deep breath. This was it. She couldn't afford to hesitate. They had to take it down. She fired, the blast echoing through the hall as the slug round slammed into the sentinel's leg. The machine staggered, its leg crumpling under the impact, but it didn't fall. Instead, it turned its weapon toward her, its glowing eyes narrowing in on her position. Penn didn't have time to think. She was already moving, darting to the side as the machine fired again, the bullets ricocheting off the walls around her. She had to keep moving, keep the pressure on. They couldn't let the sentinel get the upper hand. Alvarez's voice came through her comms, sharp and commanding. "Penn, aim for the neck." "That's the weak point." Penn nodded, her mind clear as she lined up the shot. She fired again, the slug round slamming into the sentinel's neck. The machine let out a low, mechanical whine before it collapsed to the ground, its system sputtering and shutting down. The room fell silent once more, save for the distant sound of the storm outside. Penn's heart was still racing, her hands trembling as she reloaded her shotgun. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. She glanced over at Alvarez, who was already moving toward the next room, his face hard and focused. "Let's move," he said. "We've got more ground to cover." Penn followed him, her mind still reeling from the fight. They were closer to their goal now, closer to finding out what was really happening here. But no matter what they found, Penn knew one thing for sure: they were going to need each other if they were going to survive.